Welcome, everyone. All right, so thank you for joining us today on this session. Today is kind of a little bit different from typical master classes. What we want to do today is have a conversation with people that have gone through the process of moving from their past MP2 solution all the way to Hexagon EAM, and what was the reasoning behind that, right? So we want to make sure that we capture all this information. We want to ensure that everything that they did was can somehow guide us in the process today. So welcome, Mike, and welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us today. So Mike is the engineering manager. He has been quite a while with Price Industries, and Price Industries has been an HVAC company, that HVAC manufacturing company, and they've been working in different facilities throughout the U.S. and other countries. Um, so the idea here is to be able to understand what they're going to be, what they did, and how we can mimic that for other plants, right? So, welcome, Mike. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Ernesto. So,
And Michael Ilardi, also Michael is the maintenance supervisor in one of their plants. It's Crest Ridge, right? And one of the, in fact, that's one of the most modern and newest facilities that they've been working on and keep working on. As I learned earlier, they're doing kind of an expansion there. So thank you, Michael, for joining us as well, and welcome.
Of course, thanks.
All right. So before we get started, has anyone in the audience have has anyone used MP2, or are they currently using MP2 at this point, um, that we have any information of? Okay. And also, if you've been using MP2, are you looking forward to using mobile devices? Are you looking at things like being able to develop your own reports and being able to, create reports that not only the ones that MP2 generates, but the ones that you want to have, right? So if you have had these challenges, today's session is for you. All right. So a little bit of the breakdown, right? So it is my understanding, Mike, that you've been from the beginning, from the process of moving MP2 to EAM, and Michael came in a little bit later, but he has been during the transition phase for a big part of it, and also on the day-to-day basis, being able to not only take the most out of what is already implemented for EAM, but also what needs to be, developed for the days to come, right? So thank you both for joining us today. I would say the first thing I want to discuss is, the back in the day. Mike, tell us a little bit, if you can, of what was MP2 being used for back in the day, and what were perhaps some of the main takeaways from that.
just to kind of give a little history, I actually was the one that put MP2 in. So, back when early 2000, we had a manual work order system, which most people know is a handwritten piece of paper that came into the maintenance shop, was lost, and all the traditional things that happen and trying to track through getting something repaired. So we started looking for software, and we came to the conclusion MP2 at the time was the best solution on the market. We actually put in the Access version of MP2. Started out all the asset loading and started doing the work orders. basically paper was then manually put into MP2. Slow, but started to gather data, and we started to understand our real equipment needs and our maintenance assignments. And then we grew that to MP2 SQL. And the reason to do it was the instability of Access. Those that are familiar with Access know that it does have some stability issues as the database grows. You start to have that problem. And so we got on SQL, and I would say we were on SQL maybe a year and a half, not very long. And that's actually where we kind of got more engaged with Visual K. We started looking at the EAM version, and we were looking for something that was a better platform. So when we did look at the platforms that were out there, we really questioned, did we have a problem with MP2, or was it more the platform? What did they have? So we engaged, we talked through the process with Visual K, what was the transition method, and we developed a plan basically to convert. And it's really just a conversion. A lot of the commonality of MP2 is in EAM today. The screens may look slightly different, but the reality of it is the data is very similar. It's just your ability to access, manage, and do something with the data, particularly in reporting and management. And Michael can talk about some of the newer things we're doing, criticality and things that are a little more complex. But we decided that that was the right direction. And it allowed us, at the time we were looking at an ERP upgrade, and we knew MP2 was not the solution to work with our ERP. So
were you kind of, to summarize what you did, you were at the day using MP2 specifically for work management, and did you have anything to do with inventory management or only work management?
Only work management, and we have kept it that way. We're actually in that transition phase now, but we only kept it in the maintenance function for work orders. Okay. And asset management, truly asset management, which we have all our assets in the EAM software now.
Nice. And so, right, so you used it for work management. Did you have any reports being generated? Was any information being analyzed out of MP2?
So out of MP2, particularly with Crystal, I was able to do summary reports because it was a stronger platform to work with. So I could see how many work orders were completed, on what assets, how many hours were used, all the basic data, and I could write monthly reports and find out my key assets that were problem assets was looking for, and are we keeping our equipment maintenance done. So we had started in the latter part of 2010 to start putting all our PMs in a formal fashion. Instead of just having a work order saying I did a PM, we actually wrote a PM structure for that. Some were very simple PMs, just the lubrication type PM, to a very detailed press inspection. And that all has transitioned to the EAM and straight from the MP2. That's I'll emphasize. Everything can be moved over. So the fear of that, it's background work, but it can be moved, and you never lose MP2. You always have access to the data. That's one of the beauties of the synergy between the EAM software that we're on today and the old MP2 that we were using. We can still see the MP2 data at a very rudimentary level, but we have it. We never lost any of it. So I know a lot of people are concerned about that. Hey, I've got all this data for many years and I'm going to lose it. You don't lose it. It's still there. And you can still query it. You could still write reports on it, all those type of things.
Yeah, you have your not only your asset information, but you have your history of maintenance that you completed. Anything that was there can be transferred. Now, let me ask you something. Was there anything specific that you were lacking, that you needed to, get out of the solution that made you look out from MP2 and move forward?
So one of the things that we were concerned about was the interface. It was not very robust compared to the other interfaces that the current workforce was getting used to. The mobile concept with our cell phones, iPads became more prevalent, desktops become less prevalent. And we also wanted our maintenance technicians to focus on the work instead of worrying about whether I could get it into the computer.
Right.
So that was one of the drivers, and it's still a driver today. Michael will tell you that one of the keys is having that mobile capability. A lot of people are scared of it, but it was probably one of the highest drivers for me to get the maintenance team doing maintenance and less worried about filling out paperwork. So the EAM software is very oriented towards that. It's auto recording, pictures, all those things that make it easier to tell the story of what you're really fixing. And it's easy for the floor to request work orders. So no longer do we have the piece of paper. It's actually a button that says I have an asset and I have problem. And it goes right in and immediately is visible to the organization. So
yeah, I seem to recall. I'm sorry?
That's really important. The visibility, the visual side of it is really important.
Yeah. I seem to recall back in the day, the process and the picture I witnessed was you had your paper mailbox for requests, and then people had to print out their work orders to go to the job, remember whatever it was required, and then come back, sit down in the computer, type in all that information so that it gets updated in the system, right? So it was a process where you had your operations team or your production team being able to report. They just had a paper for that, which could blow away and no one even knows that it happened, and then come back with the whole process, the whole manual process to do that. And I guess fast forward to after the implementation, it was all computer based, right?
Right. It's computer based and task oriented. Tasks are a big part of the way you draw up your work plans. And Michael led a lot of those efforts. He came in after EAM was already here. And Ernesto and myself have worked with many, I'll say mostly co-op or intern students. And we found over the years, and I think Ernesto's probably known all of them, they're very adaptable to doing the data management, the data creation, all those things that are necessary to get your assets at the most accurate information in the system.
Exactly.
So that really helps.
Yeah. So let's move to that process, right? And before we do that, I want to encourage everyone who's watching us today. You can feel free to type in your comments, your questions in the comment section, so we can throw those questions at Mike and Michael and see what they can tell us. All right. So, and back to the conversation. I wanted to transition to what the e-implementation project was, right? So what was let's say, the original scope of the transition from MP2 to EAM, and did that ever change?
It did significantly, actually. Initially, we thought, hey, we'll just work with Visual K. We'll get the whole team together, say this is what we want, and we'd be on a path, and we do it. And I think that we found that we needed a lot more planning. The part that probably was missed in our early was, okay, what are our goals? What are we really trying to accomplish? We didn't really know that. And I think if you write those goals down and get them to your consulting team, they can help. I would highly recommend engagement from the facility. Don't give it to the consultants. They'll do it for you. They'll move it over and you'll be on EAM in 3 weeks. You won't know what to do with it, but you'll be on EAM. you need to have a vision and a thought process on those goals, and they got to be realistic. Don't expect to move over and immediately be operating. I would say you probably would not be able to operate an iPad on first 3 weeks. Just wouldn't happen. But we slowly changed directions, got a little less group people in the meetings, more focused meetings, and then we started the implementation one facility at a time. And we actually met with the maintenance team and went through basically 2 separate sessions. We made them very comfortable with the computer side. And then we opened the door and said, hey, but this is really how we want you to work. And I don't remember, Ernesto, if you taught that, or I can't remember exactly how we did that, but we went through that phase and taught them the iPad, and we have resistance. There was some people that said, no, I want to use a computer. And that took 3 or 4 years to really do the conversion of people to the iPad. In some cell phone, limited on the cell phone. We didn't really emphasize the cell phone, but it's very capable. And the other thing that we did is the floor implementation. We call them kiosks because most people in today's world are familiar with kiosks. So you walk up, that's how you put your work order in. All of that training was not done in a classroom. And that's a big, important part. We put it in their area of comfort. So if it was a supervisor, lead hand person, in our case, we're on the floor. We did the training on the floor. We had them actually do the work. We didn't just say, okay, here's how you do it and walk away. And we did it each section of the plant at a time. And it usually was a Visual Kei consultant, and it was a Michael type person. An intern would usually be with them, and they would support that effort on the floor. So that transition on the floor became a little bit invisible. We showed them, hey, here was your piece of paper you used to do. Here's what you can do today and how simple it is. And just over time, you know, they adapted to it. And in the last 5 years, we've made significant improvements with Visual Kei's help in the way that interface actually works, how easy it is to get a work order put in, and the urgency. And I mentioned criticality and things of that nature, and now actually involved in the thinking process. So the transition planning phase, you know, with a consultant, if you plan it and think about it and limit your team and assign an administrator, and we can talk about administrators probably for a whole session. Ernesto could just have a session on administration. But yep, you need an EAM MP2 administrator to manage the transition. You'll have IT people and things of that nature that may be background, but that administration person is critical. And as much as I wanted to say I was administering, I wasn't able to administer and do my regular job. So it is a commitment on any team that's doing it to put a person in charge.
Yeah. So going back to, you mentioned establishing goals, right? When you were able to define those goals, what did they kind of look like?
Well, we had 2 focuses. We wanted to be able to visually see all our work orders and where we were and what was completed, what was active, what hadn't been worked on, but we wanted also to understand our PMs. That was the thing we never displayed. They were there, but we didn't display it. So we wanted to understand that. And then we wanted to figure out how to make sure that safety took the highest priority in the goals. The other thing is we wanted all our assets. We have some assets in and some assets not in, and our numbering scheme needed to be identified and fine-tuned. And we've done that, and we've been through 2 or 3 transitions in numbering scheme. So those goals were in. We talked with the consultant. We got recommendations. What was best practice? You know, obviously each industry is unique. We happen to have a lot of assets. One of the things that caused us a challenge is we have tooling that goes in a press. So how do you associate those? Those are type of conversations we had to have and how we would handle them. And there's multiple solutions, and there's not a one-fit-all answer. We also had to decide, we were a growing organization. We had, I think when we first started, we had 3 plants. I think by the time we were done, now we have 6. But,
Wow.
we went through how do we do each organization in a key fashion, and how do we make sure we have common goals in our work order types and work order assignments and all those things that we found EAM can almost auto generate and do for you. That's understanding what EAM's capability will help you set the goals, and that's where your consultant can really help. And Visual K did that, and that's kind of how we moved from the initial phase where we had everybody till we got down to a fine group and then presented what we wanted.
Okay. I have 2 questions in the chat, and I also wanted to do another question. So I guess the first one is, how fast was the return on investment?
I don't know if we can give you an exact number. I would say that you're going from a different type of platform. MP2 was a hosted on-site platform. This is one of the decisions you have to make to an in the cloud. And obviously, at the time we were doing it, the cloud was, I won't say it was new, but it was not readily known. So that was a little different. So the licensing structure and the things, the way you actually do things is different. You know, a desktop version versus a mobile version, and this gets complex in the way that the EAM structure consultant can help with that. I don't know that we measure the investment side of it. Ernesto knows we've grown every year with it. You know, we've worked with the Visual K team in assessing what we're using, what licensing structure we're using, and how we're using it. And we've grown out of one structure to another structure over the years, one type of platform to another for the way your work orders are presented. You know, because the platform has multiple ways you can use it. It's designed for service technicians versus factory technicians. Those are 2 different things. You know, somebody that's going out on service calls versus somebody that is in a facility that goes on a service call. Those are really 2 different things. So I would say that we saw immediate impact from the return to get equipment back up and running. There wasn't a question, where's the piece of paper? It was, okay, here's the report of what we're working on today. So to the management team that you would meet with, or your production meetings, your management meetings, you could show quickly where you were and what your picture is. Michael knows. He can immediately tell you today when he walks into his, I think it's 8:30 meeting now, he already knows all the equipment, what's being worked on, what's next in order, and he can get the priorities changed immediately. So I think that return is hard to calculate because down equipment costs. So anytime you have an asset down not producing, it's costing.
Yeah. Down to the minutes to a report, work order reporting of itself is almost invaluable.
Yeah, and also you have the, like I said earlier, you have the going from the paperless request, the paper request, and then going back and inputting all that information to now just being one input on the computer for the request that goes directly to the technicians. They get the job done, document all that information, and they don't have to sit down afterwards to document that. But just by that, there's a lot of time that has been saved in the time you have to let's say complete a work order or fix an asset.
Due to those requests being digital, there's many different ways you can have that information delivered to your technicians as well. We utilize several different methods.
Yep, and there's also, you know, the notification process, right? So you can have people involved. Let's say you want to have a person like Michael notified whenever a high priority job is submitted, and then that would help him pay attention to that particular job, and, you know, come back and say, well, this has been done because of the parameters we set up. I've been notified, and it was properly followed up. And it was done prior to other tasks that perhaps didn't need that much attention or could be delayed a little bit longer. Okay. The other, I kind of, you mentioned a little bit of going to the cloud. Was it a specific reason that you went with a cloud environment instead of an on-premise installation?
Um, and it was really our IT, local IT capability and support made the decision. Um, the only side of it that we found with the cloud was, there is an impact when a change is made. Although Michael can tell you that sometimes it's a little more complex than others because you do have capability to customize EAM to your needs. But I think the reason was more the expense and the maintenance of software internally versus externally. And this allowed us to be compliant and not have to say, okay, we decided not to keep updates. And this way we're keeping updates so we can get support. So Visual K doesn't have to come to, well, yeah, you're on an old revision from 6 years ago and these changes have been made and they'd have to catch us up, which obviously can come quite expensive in the future. And with what we've had, we really have not had any major issue since being on the cloud, even with the transition from the previous supplier of EAM, which was not Hexagon before it went to Hexagon. Even the transition to Hexagon was almost seamless. And that's because the cloud allows that and doesn't really affect the customers. Michael will tell you, we've never had more than a day or two, right, Michael, where we ever had any major
Right. Yeah.
outage. It's never really ever out. To be honest with you, it's all backed up. All your data is backed up.
Systems we've never had full outage where people can't log in anything. And we've had some issues with reporting, backups for custom pages and reporting whenever there's an update. But then again, there's always workarounds. Usually that's because there's something that, wasn't backed up or some kind of case like that. And the support is extremely quick. I've put in dozens of support tickets and I always get replies within 15 minutes. Resolutions within a day most of the time.
Yeah, and most softwares today are going to cloud-based type technology. I think that's the future, on-premise technology, other than some businesses require that, but generally I would not recommend it, and particularly in your asset management side. It just is so much easier.
Yep. And I guess there's another question here, right? So how long did the migration take? Let's say the first 3 plants you mentioned.
Well, if we talk about the first plant, took a year and a half, but we were planning the other plants during the year and a half, and then the other plants pretty much were within 3 months of the time we said let's go ahead and do it. We planned it. The data was done. We had a database management person on our team. The Visual K team was ready. They wrote the transition, and and that's just basically a map. And they mapped the data over, and you were up and running. And then we did the training process we talked about with the Visual K team and the Price team. Went through and did the training, and we released it. I mean, the day we said we were going to do it, within 10 days of the time Visual K arrived on premise, made sure everything was okay, testing, all of that. Within 10 days, we were running. So it was probably 3 months after the first to do the planning, and then it was 10 days of actual physical effort on the plant level to get it done. And now we're actually in the process of doing another one. Ernesto doesn't even know, but we have another plant that we'll be adding this summer. So, and we'll pre-plan that.
Yeah, and you got to a point where you've done it yourself, right?
Yeah.
I think Prestridge was a plant that you basically implemented.
Yeah, Prestridge was Atlanta done.
Nice. So there's another question here from a change management perspective. Was it easy to get adoption from your user community after initial rollout?
Michael, why don't you take that one because you can answer it really well, especially with Prestridge and what you've seen.
I'm my buddy Brett here throwing me a.
I'm throwing you a little curve there on purpose.
Throwing me a curve, or is he throwing me a?
I can repeat the question if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, looking at it from a change management perspective, was it easy to get adoption from your user community after initial rollout?
Yeah. So we've touched on this a little bit. It depends, there's different, if we think of different communities from the plant that work together as different shareholders in the process, um, those people using it differently are different types of users. So production personnel, supervisors, managers, those on the production side, you can get easy buy-in with them by just telling them, well, you don't have to fill out the paperwork anymore, or you don't have to, from that kind of perspective, going back there. But you can tell them, hey, look, I can send push notifications to tablets so that technicians can see them. Or you can put up a ticker screen in the shop so they can see. If you're telling them that my guys are going to see a work order quicker and they can get to it quicker, and then they can get the job done faster, therefore. And then also that we can start collecting better data for reports so that they can schedule production better. And those are just initial benefits that you're going to see within the first year. They're going to get buy-in pretty quickly, right? As far as, kind of change management on the maintenance side, there's a lot of changes there as well. You're changing the process and how they're working, I'm not just going around doing work orders anymore and reporting back to home base. Now I have to actually carry a new device with me. Some people might like that. Some people might think, I'm being monitored now. But really all it comes down to is really communicating what kind of information you're going to get out of it. Look, we're tracking how to production. It's like, I know, I can tell it takes 30 minutes to do this PM every time because this technician takes 25 minutes. This technician takes 45 minutes to do that same PM. Now we know when to schedule that PM because we're getting that data from our activity tracker, our time in the app, and the time that they're putting down to record their work. The maintenance technician might initially see that. And this is something that we saw as, well, you're tracking how long it takes me to do my job now, But it really comes to just communication and delivery on what exactly you're using that information for. Because from the maintenance side, you can tell that, well, look, we can schedule your work better now because now we know how long it's taking. We can start getting into things like tracking what parts you're doing and kitting so that we can make your job even easier and really optimize the amount of time you're spending. And at the end of the day, if everybody buys into that, it makes everybody's job easier. But yeah, there's definitely some struggles there initially on just really understanding, what is the point? What are we really trying to use this software for?
Yeah. And as a second or follow-up question to that first one, there is a second one. With this in mind, what are some aspects that you would consider or should consider prior to going live?
Yeah, so that's the same kind of thing. Knowing what I just said and kind of thinking about that, what are some things that we can do to kind of I'm trying to think of the word, help that transition, help coax any of those thoughts that might be kind of negative, is coming up with a plan on how you want to package and present to whatever team will be using it, how you want to package that information to them. Like I was saying, okay, well, technicians, we're going to want this new information from you, but this is going to help make your job easier in this way, in this manner. Here's an example. I'm a maintenance supervisor, right? I hear a lot of shift blaming. Okay, well, with an EAM, you get data on that. Like, oh, if I think second shift's wasting all their time, well, now you can technically prove it. So if people, that's just one example that came into my mind, because we do run booked hour reports every month, and we can see who's completing work orders that are assigned to them, how long it's taking them. We're not using that to justify the quality of time, work time, really, but we're using it to see who's spending what time on PMs and which PMs. Are people picking and choosing? Do we have even training across on PMs and on work that we're doing, or are people just choosing what they're most comfortable with? So we can kind of use that to help with cross training, to make sure that load is being shared across shifts and by work priority as well. So if you kind of explain those things, then you're definitely going to get buy-in.
Yep, and I think I should highlight this, right? Pricing industries, the team really knows their people. they've been able to identify the skill sets for each level of let's say the roles that they're doing, and how we need to make it better for them so that they understand what's the process. Things like Mike mentioned earlier, teaching them in their home ground, right? Being able to make it comfortable for them to learn the process. It should be simple enough, but it's never the same when you learn it in a computer, in a conference room, versus in the computer that you have, where you input all your jobs and all that. So definitely that's something that you need to have, right? Know your people, know how they interact with the software, or how much follow-up they'll need, or how you keep track of those people, so that you can manage them depending on the role and the requirements, right?
That's exactly true, Ernesto. To give you an example, we have what I would call our facilities technicians, and we found that they like a list. They want to see a list. They want a printed list. So we made it's easy. You print them a list. You can show them, here's your work schedule for the week. That way they were more comfortable, even though they could go in the tablet and do the work, they were more comfortable having a list. They weren't comfortable with creating a list in their tablet. So, okay, 10 minutes, I can have them a list. It spends for me or any maintenance personnel. It's pretty simple to create the list for them, hand it to them. You can sit down and have a quick meeting, and that comfort level on the what I would call our lower skill set jobs was really good, because a lot of times they were just saying, well, I know it's going to rain on Wednesday and I've got to do something in the parking lot. So they would plan around those things. So that was one of the things we found, that what is the role and what are their capabilities is important, because everybody's not going to be savvy with every a tool you give them. So you have to do that, and you have to get buy-in. We are a union facility, so that just Michael didn't say that, but no, that was the other thing we had to do, is convince them we weren't using it for discipline. We were truly using it to manage our processes and to know where we were at all moments, to know our criticality, to help the maintenance management team match what the production team's needs were. At the end of the day, that's what our goal is everybody's got to make money, because we all got to make profits. So we're all designed to try to achieve that goal, and this is just a tool that helps you get there. At the end of the day, that's what we're really doing. And then the PM side, I don't know, Michael has the exact data, but he would tell you in one of our facilities we were almost 80% PM at one point, and that sounded really good until Michael got into it and really did an analysis and said, well, we're doing all these PMs. It's beautiful, and the equipment to go down. So why am I really doing them? If the equipment's being maintained and it's running, can I take a PM out? And he's found out, hey, we were over PMing. So the data gives you that, you find that out. And that was just pure because he was looking at the data, nothing else. He intuitively knew that he was doing a lot of PMs and it looked really good, and he could write a nice report at the end of the month, but was it always adding value? So that's the thing you now have. That data is readily available. You can analyze it. You can look at your downtime of your assets, pull a PM away. If you're still running the same rate, you don't need to do the PM. Manufacturers give you PM schedules, but a lot of times you find out it's more how you use the asset.
Absolutely.
Are. Well, now you have data to prove it.
So. And that was actually kind of my follow-up question, right? Looking at it today, what would you say are some of the main results or successes of having the EAM solution?
Go ahead, Michael. You got lots of good ones.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we can see today. We touched on reporting and the metrics that we're able to pull, our KPIs that we're able to pull. There's performance, indicators. It's like we just mentioned. Those are some great ones that we see now that we can do. But I'm going to lean towards what the future here. EAM is capable of a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff. There's a lot of modules in it that we don't even use. There's a lot of information that we can get that we're not even pulling yet. And that's what I think the biggest thing is to me, is it allows you to continue to pursue excellence in maintenance engineering, right, and reliability. So one thing we're working on is our storerooms. We can implement full stocking into EAM of our parts, tracking for work orders, check in, check out for parts, usage, kitting. It's technically is a mini ERP, and you can make it work with an ERP as well, so that you can do costing roll up for your work orders and your part usage, and therefore your departments, and for your maintenance department as a whole. And then that can tie in to production, and then you're not siloed away from production anymore. And on that, along with that as well, some of the data that you can get using web hooking, machine monitoring, we talked a little bit earlier about the immediacy of work orders, being able to have computer generated work orders and having push notifications sent out. You can have alerts set up in EAM to have monitoring equipment have instantaneous work order generation that'll send out in whatever manner you would like. That's not something we're doing yet, but it's something we're looking at, because we're starting to get some equipment monitoring technology on here. If we can set bearing conditions within our vibration analysis dashboard to send a work order if we wanted to. And then over time, we can collect those trends, get that information. And we have a lot of alike equipment in here. We can start replacing things based on that data without even having to monitor it. It's really endless, the amount of machine learning that you can even eventually get to make your plant even smarter. And that information, of course, goes back to production. Whatever telemetry data you might be pulling, you'll have data that supports scheduling for machines around maintenance work that might need to be done before it even touches the technician's hands.
Would you dare try that with MP2?
No.
No.
It could be done.
MP2, we're stuck at step 1, I guess.
Yeah, one for a long time.
Yeah.
The other thing about EAM that's really, it's customizable. There's levels of customization that can be done at the user level, what I'll call someone that's at an EAM administration type level, where you can actually customize the screens, what you see, what you don't see. You can make it very flexible. So if you're a production manager, you only need to see a certain bit of data. We can actually just show them the screen they need to see. The dashboards are very flexible. They're modern dashboards. They can show your KPIs or anything you want to see. If safety is a major concern to the safety person, you can have that screen built just to show those things. And obviously,
it's customizable by user group.
Yeah, there is capability at a higher level of writing very customized reports. That's a different software, but it is there. And then when you get into really beyond what I would call the user administrator level customizations, you can use your consultant and then actually redo the screens totally, but all flexible. You can import, export. Really, I won't call it easy. There's a little bit of knowledge there, but the import export function exists. And the good part about that, it's in Excel and you can see it. You can fill in data. If you've got a lot of data you need to input, that can be done without having to manually key it. If it's in Excel or it's in another format, you can get it into the EAM software with the import tools, which is the same tools when you do the transition. But that exists. It's flexible. All screens can be output. You can see those screens. You can see them in an Excel format really easy. You can sort, analyze, query data really quick. Like if you want to look at an asset and look at a certain range, it's not hard to do. And like Michael was saying, if you're putting your costs in, your roll-ups, those type of things. I assume, Ernesto, you still do it for all your projects with your customers. Yep. So, yeah, you use MP2 for that. So it can be used beyond just for your assets. It can be doing other things. It can do case management. There's, quality recalls. There's all kinds of things you can do that are beyond the basics. And then the storage capability for data related to equipment, asset, documentation, all that, pretty well organized, easy to find, easy to put in tabs. So if you're a maintenance technician, you're on the floor and you need to see a print, you can get to it pretty quick. If you do your links and your setups right, it's there for them.
All your documents drill down. Whatever hierarchy, there's endlessly customizable levels of hierarchy you can use. And that's another thing I would recommend is make sure you look at your current structure for hierarchies. I'm talking about department down to floor location, down to equipment processes or positions, systems, all the way down to machines and components of machines. Really analyze the hierarchy there and what information you want to pull, because that'll help you set it up in EAM better. That's one thing that we're always reassessing. And what you can do is whatever documents you want attached to equipment, you can figure out what level you want that to put in, and then on the tablet, it'll trickle down. So we have for PMs for emergency lights, we have a map of the whole building that's attached to the plant level. And so that'll trickle down to the PM that's assigned to, or we can put it at the PM, and that'll trickle down to every work order that's attached, that's generated from that PM. And so they open the PM, they go to their documents, they open, and there's the hierarchy listed out. And they can go to the PM schedule, and then there's their map. They can pull it up and go do their work.
All right. I guess I have only one or two more questions, but there's also some questions in the chat. But the first one is, what type of metrics or how are you measuring your day-to-day operations today?
So go ahead, Michael, and tell them your monthly charts and what all measurements you're doing.
Yeah, right now we're measuring, we're using two key performance indicators. We're doing our PM compliance. We're just seeing how well we're doing month to month on our PMs auto generate on the Monday, so we don't have a planner scheduler, so they generate the first of the week, and they're set up on a given window of time to completion, and they're variably scheduled as well, so they're not stacking up. If it's a weekly, we complete it on Monday, the next one's not going to be due till say the next Monday. It's not. If we do it Friday, it's not going to automatically be due Monday again. It'll generate a week out, so that helps with that. But PM compliance, and we'll also look at our proactive reactive ratio, so that we can see exactly how much percentage of bridge time we're using on PMs versus breakdowns, and that tells you a few different. It tells you a few different things. You're spending all your times on PMs and none on breakdowns. Well, I mean, that's a pretty good thing. That could be a pretty good thing. If it's really high and your PM compliance is also really, really high, then like I was saying earlier, well, maybe we have some redundant PMs in here or non-value added PMs. If we, took some of that fluff out, or maybe we condensed some of our PMs together. Like I found out we had a weekly and a bi-weekly that were very similar that prior management had put in. And I'm like, well, why don't we just make this a bi-weekly and then combine them?
Exactly.
Well, I just eliminated 30 PMs out of the month, but we're doing the same thing. So you can inflate your numbers. What it tells you is, okay, our PMs are inflating the numbers. So it gives you that kind of information. We're not doing much tracking outside of that, besides looking at, like I said, booked hours and tracking what our number one problem equipment are. We do breakdown reports as well. And also we're doing reevaluating all our criticalities. EAM has a capability of a survey and ranking setup so that you can compare all production equipment and equipment types by a survey so that they can be, unbiasedly compared and ranked in the criticality. So we're going to start utilizing that in our breakdowns reports so that we can really see what our asset health is in the plant by criticality. So there's still a lot more that we're working on and information we're working on trying to get out.
Okay, so I have a question here on the chat. How am I saving money with EAM? I think we've mentioned some of the key factors here, but can you think of any other points where you would be saving money?
You want to answer that, Michael?
Yeah, we've got.
Go ahead.
Mike, you mentioned earlier. I mean, just the ease of getting work orders delivered to maintenance timely. You know, getting wrench time done faster. I mean, it's hard to calculate. It depends on how much your downtime costs. You know, it's technically invaluable. You know, depending on the process there. And then again, I don't know how much, and I have roughly an idea how much it costs for X amount of users for EAM. I don't know how that compares to MP2. I wasn't here when we were running that. But if your company values, you know, continuous improvement and gathering data to make maintenance more efficient and therefore you're therefore making your plant more reliable, then you can want to continue to invest in that, then EAM is one of the best tools to be able to do that with all that it offers. And it's going to do exactly what you put into it, you know. And we haven't run into any roadblocks yet. I mentioned earlier some new technologies and modules in there to get more information that we're not even using yet. But we want to continue to invest in those strategies so that we can keep getting right.
I guess I analyze it to the fact, you know, almost all factories and processes have a accounting system and ERP system. This is just the same thing for maintenance.
Yeah,
it's just a core component, software component, and there's associated costs with having it. There's a maintenance cost and there's an ongoing upkeep of it, but it pays back with the long term, especially in your asset management and being able to talk about, you know, what is critical to our business, which assets cause us trouble. You know, people want to know if you got a saw and it's down 3 hours a day every day for the same issue, and you've done, you know, 100 hours worth of work on it, maybe that investment in a new saw is appropriate at that time. It's a lot easier to prove that than to say I just need a new saw, because it's easy to say I need. It's harder to prove why you need it. So it gives you that tool set.
And we know a lot of times that's what happens with maintenance. You know, just reactive. Yeah. Maintenance needs to fix this. Maintenance didn't fix it good enough, so they need to fix it again.
Michael has an asset now he's having a lot of trouble with. He's actually using the EAM to gather all the data. The vendor we're working with, you know, he'll have it. He'll say, here's everything I've done. Here's what you sent me. He knows the hours we put into it, the hours the vendor has put into it. So we'll have that data readily available.
Nice.
It's a big part of your asset strategy. And, you know, I don't know if we have any accountants in the room, but it can become your asset management tool. You know, you can do your depreciation, all those things. It's capable of doing all that for you because you can put that data in. That's, you know, we didn't talk a lot about accounting, but it does have a lot of accounting functions.
Yep. So last question, and I think this is a good summary, right? What is the difference between using MP2 and using EAM? And I think the goal here is not to repeat the whole thing, but perhaps highlight some of the things that you would.
So the biggest thing is obviously the interface.
Yeah.
Interface and reporting. So go ahead, Michael.
And you're saying the interface. Yeah, the interface comprehension is one thing I would say for sure. Just thinking back, you know, I didn't really work in MP2, but I saw some of the effects of it. We had, I know, our PM system in MP2. We imported it over to EAM. All our tasks were individual work orders, or, you know, to work on an equipment for a PM. Moving that into EAM, we can get one work order that has an attached checklist on it that allows us to have an infinite number of steps that can gather free response, any set qualitative response, quantitative measurements with nonconformities implemented in it so that we can have trigger points for those measurements. You can set up routes. You can have one work order that asks you to go on a route for 50 different pieces of equipment to do the same thing, like for infrared thermography, if you wanted to do that. So way more comprehensive, a lot more information tied together neatly as opposed to maybe as opposed to what MP2 might offer.
And I guess
Anything
one of the
to
things
add,
I would
Mike?
bring up, one of the things I bring up, and Ernesto and I talked about this, there is a risk with MP2. How much longer is it going to be supported? Is it a viable 5 years from now? Obviously, I know we can't answer that in this call, but if you're on Access, I would say you're at high risk. If you're on SQL, you're probably a little less risk. But that's one of the things as an organization you would need to evaluate. Software does become obsolete because MP2 replaced another previous version of software. I don't remember the name of it, but the company is, actually what's been integrated in today. So that's the other thing as an organization. You don't let your ERPs and all your other softwares stay idle. They do have to grow. So that's one of the thoughts, in your evaluation of it.
Yeah. And then also, we've mentioned it a lot, the whole mobile option is a huge game changer.
Yep. Okay. So I think that's it for today. This has been definitely a great conversation, and I appreciate both of your time today, and thank you for sharing your experience with us and sharing not only the good but also the ugly of how the process has been, and what's the result that you got out of it. So thank you very much, Mike, for being here.
Absolutely.
It's always a pleasure to speak with you. And we'll see you on the next one.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks
Thank
for
you.